Watch this.
If you take away the Soviet Union and its chief proxy, the PLO, international terrorism would collapse.
Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq.
Czechoslovakia and East Germany and Cuba are obviously very important additional proxies.
A third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. Libya is, while no one is watching, under the cloak, is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb.
Exporting terrorism not only to every part of the Middle East, but to Venezuela. They're in cahoots with the Maduro regime.
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon?
The answer is categorically yes.
The real question here is, can the world survive the Zionism and the belligerence of Netanyahu? Now, don't get me wrong. Netanyahu isn't the primary cause. He's not the only cause. But because of Zionism being a violent settler colonial ideology and literally an ethnic cleansing ideology, it attracts the worst of the worst. And so you have Netanyahu sitting on top, on top of this rat king heap, and he is the most violent, most racist, the most belligerently genocidal, whilst at the same time lying about his genocidal intentions. Can we survive this single movement? I mean, it would be a miracle if right now what was happening was not the beginning and signs of World War III. And I say this not as somebody who's very much kind of is hesitant to draw such strong conclusions, but we can clearly see that multiple countries are involved, multiple allegiances have been kind of formalized and cemented, or previously aligned allegiances. We are seeing right now, clearly in the foreground, the US, Israel, and Iran. That's in the foreground, and we are seeing that the US saying that they don't want this to be a forever war. It won't be a forever war. This Pete Hegseth guy, this person talking on behalf of the Trump administration, saying it's not going to be a forever war, as if to reassure the Trump base, the base that decided to vote for Trump because he was against those forever wars, and yet here we are. They're trying to preempt any conversation about Trump being make America great again. Actually, he's not make America great. He's make Israel great again. With MAGA is just a tool. It's a tool in order for him to gain power. In the end, all these moving pieces are a result of this individualistic psychology. Psychology plays a big part. Whether you can corral, get a huge amount of people behind you, you need to understand psychology, and it's not to the benefit of the nation, not to the benefit even of economy. It's the benefit of the psychology of the people who are trying to extract power from the masses. And it all turned out to be, a big shit show in the end. So Trump, on one hand, and maybe at one point he did believe he was against the wars, against these forever wars and interventions, and just focusing on domestic front. Here we are. He's been, slowly pulled towards this direction, towards supporting this ethnicity, this most racist ideology, and this racial supremacist ideology, which runs counter to Western civilization, because Western civilization is supposed to believe in justice and freedom and liberalism, but it runs counter to this ethnocentric, I am superior to those people because I was born in my ethnicity, born in my own nation, therefore I'm better. That's the only way that they can justify the bombing of schools in Iran. Now, they will deny it. They will deny the worst atrocities, because, of course, they want to give the obviously a certain image off into the world. That's the way they would, keep as much of the morale of the world on their side. The consensus of the people matter. People putting skull and crossbones on their hats, just as the Nazis did, and being very belligerent and obvious with the racist rhetoric. True evil is doing the evil and denying that you did it, or or completely, reframing the situation that makes you out to be the victim. That is true evil. That is true cunning. That is true, manipulation of the masses in order to think that evil is good and good is evil. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah himself, quite an oppressive figure. But let's not beat around the bush. Ayatollah put a fatwa on and he was against fatwa on being against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So he literally put that in his religious order, in his as a religious kind of law. And there was no sign of Iran actually developing nuclear weapons. It's just that Netanyahu, for decades now, in the same way that he pushed for Iraq being invaded, because he was very certain that Saddam Hussein has intentions to develop nuclear weapons. There's clearly no intention to do so. He also did the same with Syria and Libya, and he's got a lot of great sway behind him, because Israel lobby, which is kind of a conglomeration of different forces, different people, including billionaires who are essentially, racial supremacists. They all, support this whole notion of Israel maintaining a complete and unquestioned force in the Middle East, which allow them to do whatever they do as they please, and to use any kind of opposition to them, because naturally, when you are belligerent, you will get people who oppose you, even by just simply speech. People are speaking that they are, or rather, making it very clear to that they're against what is happening. They will use that as an excuse and leverage it for their own benefit. That is what we're dealing with in the world. And we're dealing with the lies, the fabrications, the delusions, and people are being, a large number of normies are being misled. Because we can clearly see that, the government of Iran is oppressive. But it's not up to other nations to make a change of government, because in the reality is that the US and Israel don't care about the way they treat their own citizens. Their own citizens are merely a tool for the US and Israel in order to try and control the government, try and control the consensus, and to overthrow the regime, to have it kind of fit the mold, the needs and desires of the US and Israel. They don't really care about democracy per se. In fact, Iran is a proof of how Western foreign policy doesn't actually care about democracy in the Middle East. In fact, it runs counter to the democracy of the Middle East, because in 1958 you had the democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran, who was liberal, secular, democratic. He wanted to, however, nationalize the oil in his own nation, which British Petroleum was against. And so they hatched a plan. The CIA undertook a coup operation to throw him out of power, Mohammad Mossadegh, and to install a more US-friendly, a UK-friendly, a Western-friendly government power in the form of the Shah. Now, the Shah was in power, but he became increasingly unpopular, and he was overthrown by the will of the people through the Islamic Revolution. So the US and these forces, the UK, Israel, they never considered and they never cared about democracy. It's all about having people in charge who do not have anything negative to say about their foreign policy, the way they conduct their incredibly genocidal and illegal and belligerent and forceful and just completely insane way of doing kind of any kind of dealings with other people. Because in the end, karma will bite, if not the US or the West, it'll bite the people within the nation. I mean, let's look at what happened in Afghanistan. They invaded Afghanistan, took over, Taliban were thrown out. As soon as they slowly started moving outside the country, Taliban took over again. All of these things require a grassroots movement in order to make a meaningful and consolidated form of power by the people for the people. Otherwise, you'll get this blowback, which may not necessarily, harm the US or Israel, but it will harm the free will, the free speech, the freedoms, the rights, the justice of the very people on the ground, which clearly show that the US and Israel do not care about the civilians, the citizens of these nations. So there's so much to be said here, but the real question is, will Zionism, will the earth, will the planet survive Zionism? And when I'm talking about that, will human civilization survive Zionism? Because clearly it has no regard for human life. It sees human life that is not within its own category of ethno-supremacy, its own ethno-supremacist category, as it sees that life as cheap and can be disregarded. And this is how they've internalized the moral logic of the Holocaust. They themselves came to the conclusion that if we are the ones, obviously that it wasn't them, it was it was another generation or two generations further, following the Holocaust. So it was a different people, using kind of third, kind of not even a secondary source, tertiary source base, use of experience. It's not even their experience, in order to justify a might makes right ideology, simply because they're at the receiving end of might makes right. They were at the receiving end of the law of the jungle, and so therefore they should implement that and internalize it and apply that to other people. That's where we are right now. Will the planet survive Zionism? And is it a miracle? I mean, it's quite clearly that a third world war is ongoing. I mean, is there any way out? I hope it's a third world war that is short-lived and doesn't have long-term repercussions. But clearly, the US and Israel do not care, unless they have some sort of plan B, which requires them striking the heart of Tehran with a nuclear weapon. And let's hope that does not happen. But we've heard time and time again from super Zionists that they want to nuke Iran. From Benny Morris, the historian, who's prior to his compromisation, he was understanding of the plight of the Palestinians and how Palestinians were suffering at the expense of the settler colonial project. Now he's very pro-Israel, and it's possibly because he is compromised. And there's others, there's the billionaire Zionists who supported Donald Trump. They're all very much in favor of a nuke to be used on Iran, whether they call it to dilute it a little bit by calling it a tactical nuke, or just outright just a nuke in a city. They're happy this wanton display of violence and carnage. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.